Hey, my friends, it's God's comic Brad Stine. I have a question, it's kind of a curious one. Do you think it is possible to be intolerant, bigoted, and not allow certain people to have freedom and access, and actually not being aware that's the way you think and behave? Is it possible you could be that blind to your own prejudice? Write your comments below because that's exactly what I'm going to tackle right now. Okay, Americans, I want to talk to you today about a dark, evil time in American history. I don't like to broach this subject, but as an American that cares about minorities, I have to do so. You see, America was founded on a creed that was so revolutionary that it literally was birthed from a revolution. The contents of the creed are so simple and straightforward as to seem almost unnecessary to mention. But that is the reality of history, that sometimes we have to be reminded of where we came from and where we were so that we can be vigilant to never wander back there again. The creedal phrase I am speaking about is this simple statement. We find these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, amongst which are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It does seem rather self-evident, doesn't it? I mean, isn't that what humans have believed in all cultures throughout all of history, that every human being is sacred and deserving of equal dignity and respect? Well, what is so ironic, of course, is that we have never removed that phrase from its moorings. It is always there, glaring at us as though it was a stern schoolmaster of days gone by, willingly ready to give us a sharp rap on the knuckles or hind end with a switch to drive home the point that this battle for equality didn't vanish simply because we brought attention to it. It also is set in stone so as to remind us that the road to equality for all will never end, and the demand for control and power by the elite will always be with us as well. Matter of fact, one of the seemingly archaic constructs of the founders was their reliance on the Bible, of all things, to foundationally establish the very character of the inner man. You see, the Bible, which, believe it or not, was the single most referenced book by the founding fathers in regards to establishing this nation, actually told us that man is inherently fallen in his nature, that we are sinners and we need redemption, and that left to our own devices, we will always, when given power, will never relinquish it and will exploit it to keep subservient those that want up and to retain power over everyone but ourselves. So, even though the founders used the biblical text to establish the concept within the framework of this new nation that the people would be the rulers and not the government, that to serve as a representative would be a privilege and not a continuous livelihood, and that we would welcome all comers to this nation as long as they came with the best intentions of bringing all they had to offer intellectually, spiritually, and physically, and then willingly sacrificed it all at the altar of E Pluribus Unum in order for us to grow even stronger by combining many diverse cultural attributes into the wonderfully robust soup that will be America. It was still going to be the greatest gamble in history as to whether such a government of the people, by the people, and for the people would be able to stand. This is where we have to be brutally honest with ourselves as citizens of this nation. We have not always lived up to that sacred creed. There was a time in American history where, believe it or not, the color of your skin was used as a government-mandated and approved of criteria to enslave you. I know it seems difficult to comprehend, but there was a time in our history where someone's genetic distribution of melanin, the chemical compound used to create the particular skin color we possess, which has to be one of the least important attributes of a human in regards to their worth and intellect, would be used against them, to demean them, judge them, criticize them, and invoke prejudice upon them with the full support of the government, businesses, even the culture at large, specifically the cultural elite that were in charge of distributing the mandates for how Americans must behave and treat each other. These unfairly singled out people, though they were in fact Americans and had been here for years, were forbidden to educate and inform themselves as to their history and their culture, or even to be able to be proud of where they came from. To make it worse, this new America would forbid them from educating even their children about any idea that was not approved by the institutions of power that ruled with an iron fist. These people would be made to feel ashamed of who they were and what they held dear, and would even be told that they needed to relinquish their cultural foundations and traditions and conform to this new world they found themselves in. Everything about these poor people, who were in fact good people, who contributed immensely to the American milieu, and in fact helped build its foundations and added immense amount of value to its history, would intentionally be never fully remembered and even respected. When these people spoke out, they were immediately shut down, told to go back to work, to keep their ideas to themselves, or there would be hell to pay. These poor souls didn't have access to the same distribution of ideas as the majority did, and to even ask for the right to state their case was instead interpreted as them overstepping their boundaries, and because their ideas were in fact so backward and irrelevant, since it came from these clearly unenlightened, uneducated, and inferior intellectual people group, there was no need to listen to them, because we've already decided what is good and true and right, and nothing you have to say could possibly be of value. The elite tolerated these people because they did in fact need them, but mainly to go to work, provide sustenance for the elite class, and to buy and sell goods so as to keep the economy thriving so the elite could reward themselves with their superior status, and most importantly, to remind these sub-Americans to stay in their place, or we will punish you, imprison you, or if necessary, kill you. The elite made it clear that the First Amendment did not apply to them, and they would either willingly submit to any and every arbitrary edict they decided to unleash, or there would be hell to pay. No recourse would be available to these minorities, because the distribution and communication of ideas belonged to the elite, and they certainly would never need to even contemplate any ideas that were counter to theirs, especially if it included the absurd notion that for the elite to be truly good and fair and living up to the initial creed of this nation, they were going to have to be willing to sacrifice their own prejudice and arrogance in order to allow a truly free society to thrive. The elite were going to be asked to let even ideas they disagreed with, or even more challenging, hated, to be freely distributed amongst the ethers of ideas, and then let the people decide which ideas would hold weight and influence the next generation of Americans. This slavery that demeaned and arrogantly judged and destroyed the lives of otherwise innocent Americans for the sake of the incredibly self-righteous hubris which always emanates from those in power and thus have no fear of ever needing to answer their detractors, is one of the greatest stains on the history of America. I am sure if you're watching this, you are appalled that such a time in our history ever occurred. But what is even more important is, I am sure you consider yourself someone who would have never participated in such injustice, that even if you sided with the elite philosophically, you would still be able to rise above this prejudice and cancerous attempt to justify the enslavement of those that didn't necessarily look or talk or think like you. These people are what we now refer to as the other. If you actually are appalled that people didn't help those who were being maligned and marginalized, and are certain you would have joined the resistance and the abolitionist movement, even though it went against the grain of modern society's norms. And if you believe you have the courage to stand up for the other, even if it costs you something like your job and your reputation, but that is a sacrifice you are willing to make to ensure freedom and dignity and fairness reign supreme in America, I have good news. You are welcome and needed, because, of course, the marginalized group I'm referring to are straight, white, Christian males, and even females, who are conservative, love America, and expect and demand to be treated fairly by Google and Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. I know you hate what they believe, but you told yourself you and you alone can rise above even your own prejudice to fight for the equal rights of the other, especially the other you happen to despise. See how easy it was to join the fight when you thought I was referencing African slavery brought to this nation? When there is nothing at stake and the victory has already been earned through no sacrifice of years, it was simple to jump on board. Of course, how Africans were viewed, marginalized, kept from engaging in the public forum, and told to abandon what they held most dear, it was a no-brainer to side with them. Even though the prejudice and hatred and marginalization of African slaves at that time is exactly how the left views white Christian conservatives today. Since, if you are a leftist, you are now exposed to exactly what the supporters of slavery in young America believe, and if you are shocked and horrified by their complacency to such an obvious human rights issue, then what do you do with the fact that is exactly how you treat my people today? That slavery imposed on my people now is your chance to not talk about doing the hard thing in theory, but to actually participate in lending support and demand these monolithic distributors of information either cease censoring and canceling conservative Christian freedoms, or we will all, as one, abandon their platforms and let them self-destruct. Okay, my woke Americans, time to put your money where your mouth is. The world is watching. Are you bigots and racists? Or are you truly free thinkers? This is God's comic, Brad Stine. And PC free is liberty. Hey, you are my awakened warriors. If you're watching this, it means that you were one of the beginnings of the Awakened 1000. That is the people that are actually being part of seeing the big picture of what I'm doing. You know, it's not just Brad Stine Has Issues. It's not just my Brad Stine Show podcast. It's not just my live events at comedy clubs and churches. I'm trying to say that conservatives and Christians will not be silenced. And we have to take a back door to get in because, as you know, they do kind of silence us all over social media. But I'm not going to give up the fight. I think the God I believe in has sent me on a mission, and he sent you to go along and help me. There's a lot of free content out there, by the way. Would you do me a favor? Share it and try to drive people this direction. As long as you're here every month, I'll continue to try to make you laugh, inspire you, and also defend what you hold sacred. That's what I'm here for. You can help me. Also, when you see me in your town, or you want me in your town, let me know. I'll come out there, and we will do some damage for the kingdom. Thank you for being the beginnings of this ministry that has just begun to fight. I appreciate it, guys.